Good morning, afternoon, or evening. How you all doing today? Welcome back to Mr. Morrow's intensive math class. Today we're going to move away from fractions and we're going to start learning about percents. Now, the beauty about percents is it's really combining fractions and decimals that we have already learned. Decimals, fractions, and percents are, believe it or not, all the same exact thing, but just in a different form. But I can write a fraction, for example, like 3/5, and I can convert that into a decimal, which is 0.6, and I can convert that into a percent, which is 60%. 3/5, 0.6, and 60% are exactly the same value. They are exactly the same. The only difference is their appearance. But 3/5 is the same as 0.6, which is the same as 60%. So now that we're learning percents, I want you to keep that in mind. It's the same thing as a fraction or as a decimal, but just in a different form, a different appearance. Now, when we talk about the word percent, I want you to break that up into its roots. Yeah, exactly, sir. You have per and you have cent. Okay? Per is for every. And cent can come from the Latin root of 100. So percent means for every 100. When you have 15%, that means you have 15 units out of 100 possible units. Think about pennies, okay? Pennies are a great way to think about percents. 100 pennies give you $1, correct? Okay? 100 pennies give you $1. Each penny then is 1 cent or 1%. 1 penny is 1 out of 100 to make $1. So percents, think of for every 100. Think of pennies. Everyone works with pennies, okay? You use pennies all the time when you're paying for stuff. If something, $5.07, that's 7 out of 100, okay? Think of pennies as percents. Each penny is one individual percent. So since percents mean for every 100, we could write percents in a fraction form. A percent can be written as x over 100 because percents mean for every 100. So if I have 32%, that means it's 32 out of 100. How do we write that as a decimal, my brothers? Isn't that 32 hundredths? How do we write that as a decimal? 0.32. Excellent, my brother. 32 hundredths. So again, we go back to the statement I had just said earlier. Percents, fractions, and decimals can be the same value, just with a different appearance. So a percent is for every 100. Whenever you're given a percent, you put that percent value over 100. So, let's go back to the past a little bit. Remember that when we're going from a fraction to a decimal, you can either read the fraction if the denominator is a multiple of 10, or you simply divide. What am I talking about? If I give you, for example, 2 over 10, how do I read that properly? That's 2/10. So how would I put that as a decimal? 0.2, 2/10. Okay, I could do that. Or, let's say I have 2/5. I simply divide. 5 goes on the outside, 2.0 goes on the inside. Bring that decimal up. 5 goes into 20 4 times. So that's 0.4. And 0.4 can be read as 4/10. Okay? 4/10. Very good. We're going to worry about turning that into a percent later, but we're just going back to the past here for a second. We've always got to remember the past. Now, for these examples, I want you to express each as a percent. So if I have 36 hundredths, what does that mean? That means that I have 36 over 100. But didn't we say that when we have a value over 100, it's a percent? So what would 36 hundredths be as a percent? 36%. That's it. Okay? That's it. How about 286 hundredths? How do we write that?
186 over 1,000.
No, that's not over 1,000. It's hundredths. So this is 286 hundredths. Okay? Now, to write this as a percent, this would be a little bit more difficult, wouldn't it? Would that be 286%? I don't know, would it? Think about that for a second. Guys, think about it. Didn't we say that anything over 100 is a percent? So 286 hundredths would be read as 286%. Why? Let's think about this. If we divide 286 by 100, we get 2.86. Remember that we already learned how to go from decimal to percent. Don't we move it 2 places to the right? So if I move this 2 places to the right, don't I get 286%? So I don't care what you get, okay? If it's over 100, it's going to be percent. 8 hundredths. How would I write that as a percent? 8%. Okay, somebody said 80%. Why 80%? No, this is not a decimal, son. 8 hundredths is 8 over 100. Whenever you have a value over 100, it's going to be turned into a percent. That is a percent for every 100. How would I write 16 hundredths as a percent? 16%. You with me here, boys? You promise? Okay. Thank you. May I continue? Okay. Now, I want to reverse things now. I want to write the number of hundredths here. Okay? So we went from hundredths to percent. Now I want to go from percent to hundredths. So how would I write 16.5% as hundredths? 16.5 hundredths, right? However, that looks a little weird, doesn't it? You can't really have a decimal in a fraction. So let's expand this a little bit. This is 16 and 1/2 hundredths. But I still can't do that. How do I turn 16 and 1/2 into an improper fraction? Okay, 2 times 16 is, plus 1 is, so 33 halves over 100. And then how do we divide fractions? What's the song? Stay, change, flip. Stay, change, flip. So stay, change, and flip. So this would actually be 33 200ths. Okay? But the real answer was 16.5 hundredths because I asked it in hundredths. But that would turn into 33 200ths. How do I write 36% in hundredths? 36 hundredths because it's a percent. And a percent is for every 100. Guys, are we not seeing this? For every 100. Percent means for every 100. 36% means that there's 36 units out of 100 total possible units. Are you with me here? Are you sure, my brothers? Okay. How would I write 42% in hundredths? 42 hundredths. 42% means that there's 42 units out of 100 total possible units. Does that make sense, gentlemen? You promise? Okay. May I continue? Yeah, thank you, sir. Okay, now, I wanted to show you once again here how to write each as a percent, a decimal, and a fraction. Okay? Let's think about this, guys. If I tell you 38 hundredths, okay, and actually let's go ahead and get rid of this here. Let's get rid of this here as well. Okay? If I want to write this as decimal, percent, and fraction. Okay. 38 hundredths. How do we write that as a percent? 38 hundredths. As a fraction. As a percent. How do we write that as a percent? 30, no. It's not 38 over 100. That would be a fraction. A is how do we write that as a percent? 38%. Correct? Okay. The fraction of that would be 38 over 100. How do we read that fraction correctly? 38 hundredths. So how do I write that as a decimal? 0.38. Fantastic. And then as a fraction, we know it's 38 over 100, but can I reduce that? What goes into both 38 and 100? Absolutely. So divide by 2. So 38 divided by 2 is 19. 100 divided by 2 is 50. 19 fiftieths. Does that make sense, boys? Okay. 46 hundredths. How do I write that as a percent? It's 46 out of 100. 46%. Very good. 46 hundredths means that there's 46 units out of 100. That's 46%. Remember that 46%, that means it's 46 over 100. So how do I read that number correctly? 46 hundredths, which is in decimal form, 0.46. And then the fraction form, we know is 46 over 100. And when I reduce that by 2, that gives me 23 fiftieths. So again, fractions equal percents and they equal decimals. They just simply have different forms or different appearances. But it's all the same. Does that make sense, gentlemen? Promise? Okay. Well, thank you very much. Hope you've learned a lot. Have a wonderful day.